Hello, and welcome to the Hobo CEO podcast, where we're talking all things business and entrepreneurship, including the highs and lows, with a sprinkle of neurodiversity for good measure. I'm your host, Shae Wissell, neurodivergent serial entrepreneur, personal and business coach, author, researcher, and most importantly, a mother to one beautiful little human being. This podcast is all about sharing the entrepreneurial journey, as well as tips, tricks, and advice from my guests to help you become the business owner and entrepreneur you've always imagined you could be. And you definitely can be that person. But before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the beautiful lands on which I live and work, the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and to all First Nations people that are listening today. So let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hobo CEO podcast series that we're kicking off again for 2024. And today I have with me Olivia de Sousa. I hope I've said that right. Olivia.
De Sousa.
Completely wrong.
That's all right.
And we're here to talk about all things neurodiversity and women in business, which is really exciting because it's International Women's Day. And so it's great to be doing this podcast with you. So thank you and welcome to the show.
I am so honoured. Great to be here.
I have to say I'm actually a bit nervous because this, from what I've seen of your work, this is like bread and butter, your podcasts. and mine is a hobby that I've been doing for a number of years. I don't know if it's greatly or not. People are still listening, so that's good. So I'm a little bit nervous. I probably make some podcasting errors.
Oh, my goodness. But no, I feel that too. Actually, I feel the pressure like I have to be perfect. It can be embarrassing. Like if anything ever goes wrong, I feel like I have to be this, that I have to know everything about everything. And like we're all human. It's fine. And I admire you and what you do. So you've got nothing to worry about.
Well, I'm very annoyed that my Rodecaster, which you've got the beautiful Rodecaster mic working, is not working at the moment.
It's sounding good, though. It's sounding good.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. How does it sound at your end?
Yeah, sounds good.
Anyway, thank you for coming on. And the work you do is really interesting because from what I've seen, it's all around supporting women and doing podcasts. So how did you get into this exciting space that we live in now?
Okay. Well, I tried a few different things. Like I used to work, I used to work in a business. It was a family business and I'd been in there for decades, a long time, longer than I care to figure out, and everyone can work out my age. But it was selling office supplies and office furniture and stuff, and I was in our marketing department. And part of the thing that we decided to do was to do an outreach to get to know our target market better, and that was by joining the local Chamber of Commerce and business networking, because that's who our business was, local businesses. And we'd done it before, to be honest, kind of half-heartedly, gone along to business networking events, swapping business cards, and then, sending the emails afterwards or follow-up calls. Hey, do you happen to need stationery and all that sort of stuff? And this time we went, no, we're going and I don't even know what caused me to think of this idea, but it was a good one. We're going to do it differently. And the podcast was a way to form relationships with people that wasn't, trying to sell them something straight away. And so it was providing a service. So it was business related. And then we created a platform for other businesses to be able to. So it's basically win-win for everybody. And then, that's my start into it. And I love it. And I think I just really like connecting with people and then ending up meeting people that are doing it for great reasons. Like generally people who do podcasts have a passion and a great intention behind it, like you, obviously. And so, eventually I ended up leaving. I was just so stale there, been there way too long. And so I did some VA stuff, but podcasting was part of it. I did work for Little Rockers Radio for a while, and then just did some coaches podcasts and things like that. And then I thought I was doing lots of different things, and I just had the urge to just narrow down and pick something that I wanted to focus on. And it was podcasting. So that's brought me to where I am today.
So that was a family business you were originally in?
Yes, office furniture and stationery. And
I was thinking as you were talking how you said it was time to get out. I was thinking, I wonder how that goes when it's a family business.
It wasn't that. Well, by the time my parents ended up eventually selling it because I didn't want to take over it because I didn't want I didn't love it. I liked part of it. It was comfortable, but it felt a bit. I was so stale, and I don't love stationery. Like a lot of people go, "Oh, I love stationery," and people who work in it a long time will go, "Oh no, we'll knock that out of you." There's so many thousands of things to know, and so many thousands of products, and people want that particular one, and you've got this one in stock instead, and and you got to get it out by the next day. It's remarkably high pressure, but
so you didn't want to be the next Kiki K.
No. Not my thing.
Not your thing. Well, I mean, gosh, we could have just a whole episode on podcasts, couldn't we? Because it takes a lot of time. Well, I find it takes a lot of time to get them up and running, which is why we only release 2 a month. And I find 2 a month now is a lot to try and keep up with. And you do a lot more than that.
I'm actually doing daily at the moment.
Wow. How do you find all the content? Is that daily interviewing people?
Not daily interviewing people, but I want to do more interviews. Actually at the moment I'm doing mostly solo, and I had a bit of a break over the Christmas holidays and school holidays where I wasn't doing very much, and it's kind of like I'm not promising to do it daily forever. I've just set this as a personal goal for term one of the school year. It was almost like making up for not doing much while the kids were on school holidays and they were around me, and I'm like, I'm going back and I'm doubling down. And I think especially because podcasting is my thing, if I'm going to double down on something, it's going to be podcasting, and then I can chop it up and use it everywhere else. But yeah, it's just like a personal challenge I've set for myself. And yeah, it is interesting. It's like putting a rocket up your bottom, so to speak, if I can say that. It's like, okay, what will I talk about?
Usually. So how do you, because do you know, I've never done a solo podcast. Like I've done Facebook Lives and a couple of videos, but I've never done a solo podcast. I think I'm too shy.
Yeah,
you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, but it's in your room. Like it's in your room by yourself. It's very introspective. You can kind of forget about, be in denial about anyone actually listening, sometimes I can waffle on to myself, and then, if someone says it back to me that, oh yeah, I heard what you said, I'm like, eek. Not that I should be surprised. I know people are listening, but you can be shielded from that. I think especially because it's not like social media where people can write comments. So you can be a bit more brave in some respects because you don't get necessarily the backlash. I actually remember seeing someone on TikTok saying that they wanted to broach a certain subject and they were going to save it for their podcast because it was too controversial and they didn't want to deal with. So
well, I just don't know what I'd want to say, actually. Like, what would I talk? I don't know what I would talk about.
Oh, there's no need to. It depends what your goals are and what you want to do with it. I mean, obviously my thing is podcasting, so it makes sense for me to go hard on podcasting and but I talk about business, I talk about podcasting, but I don't only talk about podcasting because, especially being multi-passionate and in more recent times I realised that might be related to an ADHD trait that we often are, the idea of only talking about the things that my target market might want that makes sense to be able to sell them stuff about podcasting would just bore me to tears, and I just share more of my full self because I think people are multifaceted and people want to hear about different aspects of life. So I do that in my podcast. So I do share some business stuff, but some just to get a bit philosophical, I guess, and talk about different things.
It's interesting because like the Dear Dyslexic podcast show has been running now for 6 years, and I always thought, there must be a cap on how many podcasts. And I mean, we just launched a 62nd last month. And I thought, surely we'd stop talking about it. But it's amazing how, like you said, it starts to grow and there's so many different facets of life. And, now we're talking more in the neurodivergent space, and it's such a buzzword in some ways at the moment. That there's always feels like there's a lot of content, but I've never felt it was content I could just talk about on my own for some reason.
And and I do like some part of the reason I do the solos, well, I enjoy it, but it's also efficient. Like I'll just book the time and I'll just do 5 episodes in one day, and I can control the time and I can just do it in and out. And I have been helping some people getting podcast gigs and put my own on the back seat. So it keeps getting left another day. But I actually do want to do podcast guests, have podcast guests on my show, and maybe do some podcast swaps and stuff like that. But there is a different dynamic that comes out from doing interviews. You can get the content from other people, so it takes the pressure off you a bit. And it also is great for the show itself to provide what people have to offer. And I think you show up differently. That does take the pressure off. It's nice to be able to have banter, and you just naturally show a different side of yourself. So there are benefits because you react and people draw things out of you so I do enjoy that as well.
Yeah, I think people see the more humorous side of me, because most of the time I'm up in front of people presenting research and not always such fun content. And then when I have my podcast, it's normally a lot of laughing, swearing, and
so I can swear.
Oh yes, definitely. Getting sidetracked on multiple topics and not actually talking about the thing that was supposed to be this morning. I did a podcast and supposed to talk about women in research, and in the end we were talking about living in the UK and all this random stuff. And at the end, I'm not sure how useful this podcast will be, but it was a great conversation. How does your ADHD, like, do you have strategies to help manage? Because like coordinating podcasts takes a lot of bits and pieces, like to put it all together. Like I find having to get it out on socials, doing the recording. I have someone that does the editing for me, but the promotion. So it's always been more of a resource rather than a huge promotional tool for what we do. So I'm not because I don't have the time to consistently put out bits and pieces of the podcast over the month. So there's some really amazing apps coming out now that I'm starting to use, that I'm starting to use to help. But do you find that with your ADHD, it helps you to be able to coordinate all that stuff, or are there strategies you need to put in place to like get it all done? Because sometimes you can go off on tangents or you can be hyper-focused or the other way, multi-focused.
I think anyone needs help, ADHD or not, but I have with ADHD has made me more aware of to get people in to help with the areas that aren't necessarily my strengths, which is more the sticking to like a project management, super organized. Like I will be great with the quality of what's done and the vision and the quality that I want put out for clients and stuff like that. But sometimes when it comes to the keeping checks and making sure everything's coming through on time, that the client has sent through the MP3s and things like that, I have people to help me make sure that all works. So I think it's just shone a light on and given me an explanation. Previously, I might have thought that I've got to get better at this thing, I've got to get better at that thing, which I still do in some respects, but it's made me realise maybe I actually need some support in some areas. So it's made me ask for help and actually look for when I have people help me, like I said, and I ask for them to have the traits where I don't. I ask them to have, I'm looking for someone with great time management skills and organisational skills and things like that. But I think you need help. I mean, and that's why I do it as a service for people and done for you stuff, because I know time is the most valuable resource for myself, and the thing that I need for myself, I figure other people need. And so that's why I do this. I think you need to ask for help. I mean, someone once said, and it stuck in my head, and I'm sure they didn't make it up, was CEO doesn't mean chief everything officer. It's chief executive officer. So I think you need help to make it all happen.
I probably need a few CEOs to hear that statement. But you're right, it takes a village, doesn't it? And, it's, I think, learning what you're really good at and asking for that help, because we do, regardless of being ADHD or neurodivergent, we do need help in different areas. Do you find that sometimes I want people to help me in the areas I'm not good at, but then I get frustrated because, like, I'm not good at those areas and it doesn't mean that much to me? Does that make sense? Like, it's kind of like then you're headbutting because they're really, really good at it. Like, I'm not a fine detail person at all. And even though I know I need someone that's really fine detail because that's their strength, sometimes I get frustrated because they're so in the detail and I can't think in that way. But then I get in my head, I'm frustrated because I'm like, I don't really care about knowing.
Oh, who cares? This is so boring. Get on with it. Just finish.
So even though you need those strengths brought in because it's not your strength, then I feel like I'm headbutting against that strength because I can't understand it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Do you ever get like that? Or maybe it's just me.
Yeah, but at least, I think the fact that you can see it in yourself is enough. I think once you realize that brains work differently, and this whole ADHD versus, someone who's super organized, and then there can be extreme where it's debilitating in the other direction of OCD or something like that. But when it's just fascinating, and then it just makes you realize that different brains work differently, and I guess it makes you more just tolerant. I don't like the word tolerant because it sounds like you're still annoyed. Yes. So, I mean, I think, even though you're getting frustrated, at least you can observe it in yourself. So that's... I need to learn some strategies then to not be frustrated. You're allowed to be frustrated. You're allowed to be human.
I just like my husband, he's really processed. And like we can't cook together. He's probably walking past saying, "What is she talking about?" He can't be in the kitchen if one of us is cooking because he can't cope with me. I just creatively cook. I just
I never follow a recipe.
No, I can't.
Not exactly.
No, and so I've never been good at baking because you have to be able to follow the recipes. So the cake rises but I used to do a lot of cooking when I was younger and was going to be a chef. And so I can't, and I'm not processed in the kitchen, it's messy, and where he's really processed, he has to follow the recipe to the T. And so he can't watch me because he gets frustrated with how I'm so chaotic in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I can't be in with him because he's so precise. I'm like, no, just add some more salt. It's fine. Or just add some basil. Don't worry about what the recipe says.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where we just know now to step out. So just walk away.
Too many cooks.
Too many. Yes, that saying is there for a reason.
At Rethink Dyslexia, we are doing things differently. As a global leader in creating inclusive environments for adults with dyslexia, our commitment is to provide individuals with opportunities to live healthier, happier, and more connected lives. Through our range of tailored services, including coaching, learning and development programs, consultancy, and training, we're helping dyslexic individuals, businesses, and organisations to better understand and support their dyslexic employees. So if you're looking for insights, inspiration, and expert advice on dyslexia and how you can provide inclusive practices and environments, then head to rethinkdyslexia.com to find out more, or book your free consultation today.
So if someone was going to use podcasts as a marketing strategy, are there any key things that you think someone should be thinking about? We're jumping around in topics here.
That's all right.
I was just thinking as we were talking.
Okay, well, I think, first of all, I think generally people I know who do it is because that they've had been in a bonnet and wanted to do it for a while. So if you have, that's probably a good sign that you should. But in terms of how it can market it, so you want to know how to market it or what they should think about?
Yeah, what should they think about when they're trying? So like for me, it's a resource for the dyslexic one, it's a resource for people to access into people that they may not meet. So kind of like to help reduce that isolation and to normalise how they feel. Mm-hmm. And that there's other people out there that might be struggling or might have the same strengths or whatever we're talking about. But if you wanted to use it more as a marketing tool for your business, like, do you think is it a good tool to market? Because you said that in your business you kind of flipped and said, I want to do something differently. Did you find
Yeah,
that
well,
helped?
definitely. I find like it's a good idea to do something that's podcasting is what you'd call cornerstone content. Like it's the rich, evergreen kind of content. So the other types of cornerstone content might be a long form YouTube video or a blog or something. It's something that lives for a long time, but it also, and so it's got all the SEO benefits, and someone can discover this podcast, in a couple of years' time or whatever. So, so there's that, but it's also the thing with cornerstone content is that it's a resource, it's a rich resource that you can pull out quotes from, which now with, AI tools to get the transcript and stuff and get all that from is easier, but it's a resource that you can use for all your marketing. So it can be basically the engine. So you can use it, chop it up, get lots of video clips. I mean, how often do you scroll through TikTok or YouTube or Instagram or wherever and you see all these people with the headphones on? Like they've actually made the content as a podcast and you're finding it somewhere else. So it's a rich content that feeds everything else, and it can end up in your newsletter, emails, and it can be a blog on your website. It can just be the one activity that you do, especially if you are happy to get support. Like, hello, I can do that. You can do the one activity, and if you get the support, it can be actually less time. Like, because if you're doing one podcast, you can just do it, leave it in a Dropbox folder and share it and let it feed everything else. So you can get social media posts, graphics.
Do you edit as well?
Yes, I do. I do edit and repurposing. So
if I sent you this file, you could produce like 5 different types of content with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. This is leading to very interesting conversation.
So you can do, So you can have a presence everywhere from one activity. But also the other thing I think is one of the biggest things from podcasting is the relationships. Like, I'm getting to meet you now, and it's a leveraging tool to meet people. You could just be meeting them on your podcast, but you can also say, like, everyone, like, it's great to do podcast guesting. I mean, I'm very grateful. I get to be in front of a whole different audience thanks to you. So thank you. And I'm so grateful. But I think a lot of people want to do podcast guesting, which is fair enough because it's easier, right? You just use someone else's platform. But I think if you've got a podcast, it's reciprocal, and it gives you it's a way to say thank you, and a way to be able to give back, and a way that if you do want to be a podcast guest, that you can say, hey, do you want to do a podcast swap, which might be easier to get a yes to than can I just be in front of your audience, please?
And I've only been on probably 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 or 4 podcasts as a guest after all the I've created, well, including the Hobo CEO one now, over 70 episodes, which is clearly not a lot compared to you. But, I haven't been on many podcasts, even though I've been doing it for so long now. I've never really put myself out there to be a guest, and I don't think that, like, the people that I've interviewed usually aren't on, they don't have their own podcast show. And I think the missing point for me has always been they haven't really promoted it. It's like through the networks. Like I've said, here's the podcast is out, can you share it? But it hasn't been shared a lot. And I found that bit challenging, because if we had more people sharing, then we would get a lot more.
I think that you've got to make it as easy as possible for them. I mean, they're using they're giving you great content, which is a great thank you, and you don't necessarily get to expect them to share it, I guess. But when you are putting in the work and the effort, it's human to feel a bit disappointed, but I guess you've got to make it as easy as possible for them. But I think one of the things you could try, if you're sharing like the actual content, one of the simplest ways to get people to do it to actually share is via Instagram, because you can add them as a collaborator. So if you share a post or a reel, you can invite them to add to be a collaborator, and all I have to do is click on accept. So come on, people, do that at least.
Yeah, well, I could start doing that. And do you use YouTube Music? Because I didn't even know that existed. And then I was telling someone about our podcast, and she's like, "Oh, I can't find you." And she was on YouTube Music, and I'd never even.
Yes, actually, that's something. Oh, this is
before.
Relatively recent. You mean like your podcast? This is
Yeah.
relatively recent. So get on it, because it's even like last year they got onto wanting to do podcasts, YouTube, and then more recently they did it so you could do it with your RSS feed. So
Great.
it's a no-brainer. You're going to do that now.
Yeah, I'm going to do that, because at the moment, because I use Blueberry hosting system, and I always spell it wrong and end up on the
I always spell it.
The Burberry website looking at things that I can't afford to purchase.
It's a weird spelling.
It is a weird spelling, and I love it. It's a fantastic tool. And so can you run it through Burberry then?
What you do is you just find your RSS feed, and then you go to YouTube, and you go into the Creator Studio and go to create a new playlist, set it as a podcast, and then if you scroll down, you'll see a place to put the RSS feed. So you pop it in there. Next. They'll send you a verification email. You've got to make sure that
I've got a YouTube channel already, so I just add it to that YouTube channel, do I?
And it'll be a playlist on your YouTube channel.
Wow, there you go for everyone that's listening today.
That is a no-brainer, quick way you can get on one of the biggest search engines in the world easily.
Oh my gosh, because, I was so excited when I first got onto Apple, because, a lot's happened in 6 years. At the time it was only Apple. Now, Spotify.
Now Spotify's actually.
I'd never even heard of you. And I said to my husband, have you heard of YouTube Music? He's like, yes, of course. It's like, okay.
So I was very excited because I debated when I thought it was very exciting when they were going into podcasting, but because I've learnt lots about YouTube from my background, doing my other thing is children's music, and through that and working as a VA for Tina Harris from Lala's Big Live Band.
Yes, I've met Tina.
You've met? Oh yes, you probably have from all the
Awesome Yeah.
I've learned lots about YouTube through her, and through her met Shannon, who's also like #1 YouTuber in Australia and stuff. So I learned lots about YouTube. So when podcasting was going on YouTube, I was like, that's interesting, but will it work the same way? Because I know that they're visual editing, highly polished, and doing viral content. Like there's a whole other strategy with YouTube that I was like, be interesting to see whether to do the whole YouTube strategy with podcasting, if you wanted to go big with it, is actually quite intense, but like a lot of strategy and work and editing and stuff that goes into it. But if you just wanted to know whether it was okay to just put your podcast there and get a benefit without doing all that, the fact that you could do it with an RSS feed is kind of like a permission slip to not have to necessarily do all that. That probably doesn't make sense.
That's fantastic. Yeah, all right. Well, that's I've got that on my list to do now. So thank you. And
so that's a simple thing, yeah.
That is a simple thing. And I think after talking to you, I need to get on more podcasts.
Yeah. So, I mean, use that platform that you've got. I was even thinking of someone for you. I have to think. Because I mean, once I'm doing this outreach for other people, it's like I start thinking, actually, that person would be good for that person. I have to try to remind myself who I thought. But yeah, I'll let you know.
And my daughter now watches Stripy Socks.
Oh, she does. Yay.
Yeah.
It's the Stripy Sock Club, which is Lala's Big Live Band, for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about.
So I struggle to listen to it when it's early in the morning. She loves it.
Great, yay. Stripy Sock Club.
Yes. I'm not good with background noise and things like that. So when she's got the TV on, I can't kind of be in the room. I really struggle if I'm doing other things. I know we're getting close to time, and I said to you, I'm trying to be much better because my podcast stats tell me that people dial out after half an hour. And that's when all the juicy stuff happens, normally after the 30-minute mark. So I'm trying to keep it within time.
Yeah.
But I think from a business perspective, or from a business woman, with ADHD? Is there anything that you think really helps? I know you said about getting the support in it. Is there anything like that you think really helps you in doing your business?
I think it's just changed. It's given me an understanding of myself and that I work a certain way, and also an acceptance, because when I was going through the journey of realizing that I had ADHD, you kind of know it before you get the diagnosis. And I know there's some people think it's controversial, the whole self-diagnosis thing, but I think once you go in to get a diagnosis, it's because you already know, you've already gone down the rabbit hole. So, and one of the things someone told me, because I wanted to gather all the evidence that I could. Sorry, I'm getting to the point.
No, you're right.
In an ADHD way. When I was getting a diagnosis, I wanted to go in with all the evidence, because I'd heard all these stories about people who don't necessarily get believed because they don't have school reports or enough evidence. Or anyway, so I asked my friend who, I told her earlier, I think I've got ADHD, and her response was like, this is via Messenger, so written, haha, yeah, you do. And so do other members of your family, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so I went back to her later when I was looking for evidence, and I said, okay, how did you know? What was it? And she said that I spoke the way I speak. It's not beginning, middle, end. It's beginning, tangent, this direction, that direction, and then the end. And the other thing is that I've watched you do like more career pivots in the time that I've known you, which might have been like, I don't know, 8 years or something, probably less, but than people that she's known her whole life. And so that stayed with me. And then learning about that it's often multi-passionate people. And I'd been trying to push back against being multi-passionate, because I thought, you got to niche down, you've got to pick one thing. So realizing that just made me think differently, as far as, okay, knowing that about myself and knowing that I'm going to have this thing about wanting to change direction, how do I bring things together instead? So and so my podcast, like I was saying before, is diverse, because I'm like, I'm not going to keep creating new podcasts every time I get a new idea. I'm going to bring it all in, and I'm going to bring the varied parts of me into the one podcast. So it made me change. It's made me think in terms of niching up instead of niching down. So instead of getting narrow, how do I bring things together? How do I bring my different passions together? And if certain things aren't my strengths, then to specifically look for people with those strengths, rather than always thinking I'm going to be better at it tomorrow, hopefully, and try another planning strategy. So I hope that.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear the niching up, because I think you can niche up in a business. Like for me, one aspect is doing the podcast, so that keeps it interesting. And, one part is doing research, because that's what I'm really passionate about, finding out evidence base. And then the other part is, so there's multifaceted, the business is multifaceted. And I think it was overwhelming when it was a charity, because the board couldn't cope with being multifaceted, and we weren't making any money. But I think having those different kind of tool, like the podcast, the research, the peer support programs, the workplace training, they're all different ways of being creative, but under one overarching umbrella of a topic.
Yeah.
Is that niching up?
I think so, because it's different aspects. Because it's different aspects of they're complementary.
But so it's still doing different things, so you don't get too bored at one. Like if I just had to sit there and create workforce solutions and training, I wouldn't cope.
Exactly. I think part of the thing is just understanding. Once you get the understanding of how your brain works, you go, well, this is how my brain works. I'm not going to make myself wrong. I'm going to see how I can make it right and work with the way I am.
And do you find that helps reduce overload and fatigue, because we can tend to get quite cognitive overloaded and mentally fatigued because we're spreading ourselves across so many different things? Do you find that working to your brain's advantages reduces, well, first, I guess, do you have that type? Did you used to have cognitive overload before you were diagnosed?
Yeah, probably without knowing that that's what it was.
Yeah.
Like, so why am I so confused? I don't know which direction to go. It should be this way or that way or whatever. And now that it's helpful to just understand that I have those urges to have the different aspects and the different passions to follow, and simply knowing that is helpful, and it gives you language. It makes you it actually makes you look at the whole world and people differently. You can see it in all these other people, but it also, it makes you change your tactics automatically. But I think just finding people, we find each other, don't we? I think finding people who get it and getting support and talking to people when you need to, and not having to be perfect all the time, and getting back on track. And I think all of it. But I think just understanding yourself better helps a lot.
I think that's a really nice way of finishing, because I have so many other questions and I don't want to take us off on another tangent. So I think that's a really nice positive way to finish, is understanding yourself. And diagnosis is really helpful in doing that, but it is a financial barrier for a lot of people. So I think being able to hear your story and people listening, and that resonates with someone, that can help them at least normalise how they're feeling, even if they can't get that diagnosis just yet or don't want to go down that path.
Absolutely. I think the stories have certainly helped me, so I hope mine helps people as well.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and coming on. And we didn't really have a structure today, but I think it was very helpful because we were able to cover podcasting, which is both of our passions, one of our niching up passions, and
exactly.
Also being able to talk about neurodivergence and how we can manage running our businesses. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shae.
And for those listening, you can find out more about Olivia and all her work. And if you want to start a podcast, we'll put all her details on the website so you can find out more. Or you can follow her on YouTube Music.
You can look up Magnetic Pod is my...
Magnetic Pod.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm Dr. Shae Wissell, and you have been listening to the Hobo CEO podcast. Head to rethinkdyslexia.com.au to find out more about today's guest speaker. To keep up to date with all of our news, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And if you haven't done so yet, go to your favourite podcast platform, subscribe, rate and review this podcast. Join me next time for another conversation on the Hobo CEO.